so many people, so many familiar faces, and lots of new faces. It's going to be busy today. As you can see, there's a lot of us here. And so first order of business is to let you know that we are going to be moving rooms. You might have already noticed that on the little sign outside the door, but the audio track has always been in this room for the past sort of 15, 16 years. So it feels like a little bit emotionally strange to be moving from our spiritual home. But so we're moving from this, I think this is room 3, we're going to room 1, the big one, it's under the stairs on the left, okay? Cool. The other thing is we really appreciated if you can get to sessions a little bit before they start, just to minimize disruption at the doors opening and closing when folk are trying to give you their all on stage, and also your fellow attendees trying to be inspired. So it'd be really appreciated if you can get here on time. The other biggie is, which I've not done my homework on, so now I'm panicking, is that things are a little bit different this year at lunchtime because of the renovation work that's going on in the hotel. Lunch is split into 2 sessions. Which session you're in depends on the name of your company, which there's some thinking behind that, which makes sense, but I think for the audio day, it might ruin your lunch plans. So I can only apologize for that. I'm just the messenger. So don't shoot me. You're free, of course, to go outside for lunch if you want to, but just bear in mind that it's only an hour, and that's not a long time to make that happen. So again, try and get back on time if you can. I think that's it for the order of business. The only thing I want to say is that I'm your host today, but today has, as always, been put together by John Broomhall, Broomers, JB, to you and me. And John's amazing. It's really sad he's not here again this year for good reasons, but he curated all the talks and invited all our amazing speakers. So I hope you're all going to have an amazing day and leave feeling inspired. And I would just like to ask you to put your hands together for our first speaker from Audiokinetic. It's Michael Cooper.
Oh my God, there's a lot of people. Hello. It's really nice to be here. It's my first develop, so it's been pretty cool. Saw a lot of nice talks, met interesting people. My first time in UK too, so that's been an experience. I had to rewire my Canadian brain, relearn how to safely cross the road. Had a few close calls, more than I'd like to admit. But made it here in one piece, and I can't get my password in. Hey. All right, so let's get things started. So today's talk, WAAPI and WAQL, new tools or relatively new tools in WISE to help you with your WISE authoring experience. So general structure, I'll be going over some slides, give the background and setting up for people who are just using these for the first time. Then I'll go through some demos to see how this could hopefully be helpful for you with your day-to-day workflow. So for that, no introduction. As was said, my name is Michael Cooper. I'm a senior software developer at Audiokinetic. Been there for 10 years now. I've worked on WISE authoring, also contributed to WAAPI, and now I'm currently working for the core team, so I participate in the maintenance and new features of the core sound engine. Okay, so why my resume? We'll hopefully have time after the talk for a Q&A session specifically for the talk, but afterwards I'll be around. If you want to talk anything WISE, just tap me on the shoulder. Maybe we can go grab a beer or something. So what is WAAPI? So stands for WISE Authoring API. Used to communicate with the WISE authoring application. And this gives access to a majority of the core WISE features. So project manipulations, adding, deleting, moving objects, setting properties, data operations, importing audio files, generating sound banks, UI control, setting, retrieving current selection, and also gives access to the transport. So essentially gives access to all of the SDK functions. This could be particularly useful for whatever application you write to make use of WAAPI. As you probably know, in WISE, when interacting with the transport, you only have access to the transport game object, so game object created in the background specifically for authoring. This allows you to create your own game objects and more closely simulate what would happen in your game. So where can WAAPI be used to help you in your day-to-day? So WAAPI was introduced to give users better flexibility of integrating WAIs in their workflow. So some quick examples, game integrations. So the WAI's Unreal and Unity integration make heavy use of WAAPI. So an example of that is the aptly named WAAPI Picker. So you can mirror the contents of your WAI's project in your integration. Perhaps you can make use of it in your favorite DAW. Perhaps automate file creation and rendering to import in WAIs. Maybe in your build pipeline, automate file conversion, sound bank generation. Maybe in your everyday work, you want to do something that tends to be error-prone and tedious. Or testing, maybe you want to validate your WAI's project as part of your build pipeline. This one was especially beneficial for us at Audiokinetic. It allowed us to greatly bolster our automated test suite for WAIs. So under the hood, WAAPI supports 2 communication protocols, HTTP post, so straight inter-process communication. This one is limited to remote procedure calls, so your application emits a command, gets the appropriate response. The other protocol, which is favored, is WAMP, so Web Application Messaging Protocol. This one supports the same remote procedure calls as HTTP post, but also offers subscribe and publish, which is great. Your application can subscribe to topics or WAI's events that are of interest to it, and will be notified only of those events as they occur, so it avoids your application of having to pull WAIs. To get started with WAAPI, obviously this is an API, so it requires a bit of programming, nothing's for free. But because WAAPI uses inter-process communication, you're free to use your language of choice. That said, there are many WAMP implementations available on the net. In the WAI's installation, we provide interfaces and examples for C++, C#, Python, and JavaScript. And here's the path. WAAPI content. So all WAAPI content is in JSON format for legibility. API is made up of 2 groups I mentioned earlier, so functions and topics. These are further separated again in groups mentioned previously. So sound engine API or SDK functions, data manipulation or generation, and project editing or querying. You have a full list of online, you have a link to the online reference of all functions and topics provided in WAAPI. Or for those who prefer a more hardcore approach, or if you're offline, in the WAI's installation is also the JSON schema used by WAI's to validate all incoming WAAPI traffic. So I'll be getting to examples very shortly, but quick refresher. So what are your WAI's objects? WAI's objects are the building blocks of the WAI's project. All objects have implicit references to other objects within their own hierarchy, so parent, children, have a multitude of properties, whether being values, numerical, Boolean, or explicit references to other objects. So on the left, I have a snapshot of the property editor for a sound object. Outlined in blue is all the properties. We have a few values, volume, pitch, low and high pass filter, and explicit reference here, specifically the output bus. And so how are WAI's objects identified? Either by specifying its complete hierarchy path, or by specifying its unique identifier, which can be found in the corresponding work unit file. Again, a link to an online reference for all the WAI's objects within WAI's, and the list of all their properties. And again, for those who are offline, who prefer a masochistic approach, we have the XML schema used to validate your project on load. A quick example of WAAPI content. So here we have the query function, so WAI's core object get. Arguments, we want to get information for a specific object. We chose to specify it using its path. The options, we specify what information we'd like for the object, so ID, name, and type. And here's a sample output for a sound object named hello with a random GUID. So enough with the dry slides. So going back to whys, a few examples. So one of them I mentioned is you might want to make use of WAAPI to circumvent some tedious and error-prone tasks. One of these comes to mind is you want to set values to properties on a list of objects, each of these properties having distinct values. And although WHYS does have several views to help you with bulk editing, like you have the batch renamer, multi-editor to set a property on multiple objects but to the same value, no view here can lend itself to the kind of task we want to do. It kind of lends itself naturally to a bit of scripting. So one of these cases that comes to mind is when you set up MIDI. So go through a rapid example of setting up a MIDI track and the instrument. It'll quickly become apparent why this can be basically a pain. So set up our music track. So importing a MIDI file to go to the music layout, specify our track. Great, we have our MIDI file, play, we're not hearing anything. It's kind of normal. If we go back to the MIDI tab, we notice that we haven't specified an instrument for our MIDI track. So for those who've used MIDI before, you'll know that we need to specify a root node for our MIDI instrument. It can be any container. The container won't actually play. It's just used as the target. Generally, we tend to use a blend container. So this digiflute. And next, we need to have wave samples to represent our notes. So I have a few notes here. I have about 21 files. Of course, this isn't enough to represent all the notes for possible in MIDI. The idea being, sorry, just put that up, that when WHYS plays the MIDI track for each note event, WHYS will go to the MIDI target, and from here, WHYS will determine which wave file that needs to be played for said note. Chances are it won't be the exact note, so WHYS will then pitch shift that file to match the desired note. Sorry, going back to the layout. So here we see all the children, and the way WHYS determines which file to play is based on the key range specified for the file. So you see that right here, they're all specified, they're all configured to cover the whole range. So if we were to play the track, we'd play every single wave file for every note, only not what we want. But also, you can probably tell right away, this would be error-prone, tedious, and I don't want to do this. Luckily, I have an example with only 15 files. You may have more. You may have a ton of instruments that you have to set up. You don't want to go through this. So WAAPI to the rescue. So I wrote a quick script in Python to take care of this. Go through it real quick. First, we get the current selection in WHYS, which I'll set now before I forget and I screw this up. From there, we specify that we want the children. And for each child, we want ID, name, and type. Once we get that, I put everything in a little function. Regular expression to extract the note portion of the name, convert that to a numerical value, dump that in an array, sort. And finally, by going through the array, we can determine or split the range between the files to set the appropriate range of notes covered by the file and make sure we don't have any overlap as well. Once all that is set up, then we just have to call the set property for each of the sound objects, specifying that we want to track the MIDI note, to do the pitch shifting, and to specify the min and max range. So I'm going to run this. Hopefully, we all know how live demos tend to go. Cool. So we see all the properties are set. Well, it's not very really apparent, but if I were to sort by its root note, and everything seems in order, I'm very happy because I was doing this in the hotel room this morning and I found a bug. Would have been very embarrassing. Looks good. So quick notes. I wrote this script in about, I'd say half an hour. That said, I'm a C++ programmer. I don't know Python at all. I had to Google search how to do a for loop. So this was a lot more painful than it would be for someone who does know Python. But the advantage was that I started with the supplied example. So this took me all of half an hour. If I were to have done this manually, probably would have taken me longer, probably would have screwed up quite a few times. Plus, I mean, originally these were ordered by name. There's no visual way to make sure that everything is set up correctly. So like I said, it's error prone, it's tedious. No one wants to do this. So that's one example. I'm aware that MIDI is probably not the most often used case for people who use WISE. So what if we were to look at something that may come up a bit more often? So I have a Reaper project here set up called Movement Steampunk. So this is supposed to have all my sound assets for the movement of a steampunk robot. These are divided with variables speed and size. And for each of those combinations, there are between 4 and 6 variations to have a bit of variability. So to go through this real fast, traditionally, what you'd have to do, render all your, no, there should be more than one. Render all your regions. Great. Go to your Reaper project folder. Select your WAV files, import them into WISE. Before you import them, you need to have your hierarchy set up. So if I were to set that up real quick, I want steampunk. And based on the variables I mentioned and the variations, natural structure that lends itself to this would be to have master switch container, say on speed, child switch containers for each of those speeds, controlled by size. And for each combination there, a random container for all the variations. So I'm not going to set it all up by hand. This will be long and, again, tedious. But real quick, something like that. Slow. And then random container for, I don't know, small. Then to know which ones I have to import, I'd have to look at all my file names. Going through this folder could be quite big. Find my files, drag them in. I think you see where this is going. It's pretty long, again, and tedious, and error prone. So another way to do this would be to make use of WAAPI. In this case, so we have a new extension that should be out shortly. That will be offered by WISE. This was heavily inspired by an existing community extension. So I'll give some shout outs afterwards. I just want to get through the features real quick. So we have our project. When this extension loads, it automatically connects to WAAPI and gets information on the currently loaded project. You can first specify where you want to import your assets. Just like the previous script, there's a button here to get the current selection. The cool part about this one is I can auto-create the hierarchy I was targeting. So I set up my region names to specify like a display name, plus some variables for speed and size to make it easier to programmatically or through scripting create distinct names for my hierarchy levels. Another nice thing is for each level, I can also specify to use a template object that's currently in my project and make use of a new feature, copy-paste properties. So that object, for all the common properties, we take the values, copy them to the objects that will be created by this. I'm not going to make use of it. And down below, we have a preview of what that'll look like. Thank God. This is still in development. It's crashed on me so many times. It's looking good. Oh, I called my previous one Streampunk. Well, so here we have all our assets. Right, I didn't set up audio. The assets are in, they're playing, we have meters, it's looking great. So the other nice part about this is it's all set up. I had to go through this once. This is saved with your project, but you can also save, so I'm afraid to press this. You can save your hierarchy in templates or load some, so you can have your templates set up across multiple projects. Makes it real quick. So I'm gonna stop tinkering with it because it hasn't crashed. So the shoutouts. This was heavily inspired by, I believe it's called WAAPI transfer, developed by Carl Davis. So we made use of, well, essentially importing directly from Reaper into Wise, but making use of more of what WAAPI has to offer and new features offered in Wise, such as copy-paste properties. So I don't know, the official name isn't there, so I'm not sure what it is yet. Should be available in the coming months. Be distributed on the Audiokinetic GitHub. So it'll be open source. Maybe you want to add some features to it. And well, if Reaper isn't your DAW of choice, maybe you can heavily inspire yourself from the code and port it over to your DAW. So that's it for WAAPI examples. Go back here. How am I doing on time? Half past? Okay, so I'm doing pretty well. So the other topic I want to bring up is WAQL. So I'm sure, as you're all well aware, Wise projects tend to become quite large. It's essentially just a huge database of Wise objects. I see it more and more when I get crash reports and I get your projects, and kudos for being able to get through it. It's pretty big. So it can be a daunting task sometimes to find specific items in your project. Although Wise does offer several views to help you with searches, most of them are name-based searches, like the search bar in the main toolbar, the list view. You have the reference view to find all explicit references to an object. And you have a query editor to do a bit funkier searches based on property values or RTPC usage or stuff like that. So although they are useful, they're limited, one, in the sense that you have to use multiple views, which isn't always great. And some features are just not accessible in those, specifically in the query editor. You can make use of references. So great, but we did introduce WAAPI, which does offer, as we saw, the function Wise core object get, offers access to basically the whole data model used by Wise. But WAAPI does require some setup, require some coding. So be nice if we had a fast, intuitive method of doing a query directly within the UI. So now we do. So introducing WAQL, stands for Wise Authoring Query Language. Allows querying of a Wise object project through its data model, modeled after existing query languages such as LINQ and SQL. Idea being it's simple, quick, and flexible. So WAQL queries can be used any place where you could currently do a text search in Wise. So list view and search bar, and also it's integrated into WAAPI command. So I have a few. I'm not going to go over this too intensely. So the general structure, and then we'll go back to Wise to do a few examples. All WAQL expressions begin with a $sign. Next, we specify the starting point with a from keyword. We can either start with a list of type of objects. We can start with a list of specific objects, specified either through their paths or IDs. Or we can use a traditional Wise query object and use its output as a starting point. The from keyword can be omitted, and if it is, you basically use your entire Wise project as your starting point. You can then specify multiple filters using the where keyword. This is where we can make use of all properties available on the Wise objects. So general object properties, type, name, ID, object values, volume, pitch, and relation properties, either implicit through their hierarchy or explicit relations. And we can filter as many we can chain as many filters as we want using the and/or keywords. And finally, a list of objects can be transformed by using any combination of an object's relations. So suppose I have a list of objects, I can specify, okay, from this list, I want to now work on the list of all the children of those objects. Okay, so some examples, but I'll do them live. Let's close this. So now suppose we want to have all objects of type, should type this correctly. So you'll notice as I'm typing it, the outline, actually I'll start over. Well, the edit box is outlined in red, meaning my query language isn't, or my query isn't incomplete, either because I'm not done or there's a syntax error, and we have a tooltip to try to hint you as to what you're doing wrong. So as I was doing from type random sequence, God, this is long, container, great. And from there, maybe I want to have only the ones where volume is greater than 0. So it's kind of intuitive. It's very simple. So it's a very simple case, but maybe we want to do like something that we traditionally couldn't do with all the views that Wise had to offer. So for instance, if I were to, where are you? Here. I were to create a new play event. And I'd like to know for an event, what are all the sound objects that will play once I post the event? So I have a very simple event with only one play action. Your events probably have multiple actions, multiple play actions. But for the sake of demonstrating, so again, we start by specifying our starting point. We're going to use the event itself. So I said earlier that to get an object's ID, you have to go to the work unit file. Another shortcut is if you hold Shift when you right-click, the context menu adds these items, so you can get the path or the GUID. So I'll take the GUID to keep this short. Oops, and it's still red. Great. So I have my event. What we want then is to use the children to have all the actions. So I'll transform the list to use children. From there, I only want the play actions. We only have one, but say our event was a bit more beefy. So specify where action type equals 1. A bit more on why I know it's value 1 and action type a bit later. So now we have our play actions. We want to follow those to their targets. So select target. Then finally, we have all targets of play actions, which in this case is a container. It may be a sound. So to be safe, we select the target itself and all the descendants. And then we finally only keep the ones where the type is sound. And now we only have the sound objects for our event. So clearly this isn't stuff that we could do before with all the views. Great. I'm sure you guys can find multiple cases where you'd want to do some funky searches to help you debug or God knows what comes up. So coming back to here. So this is the first implementation. There's more features to come in future releases. Although it does offer access to a majority of the data model of the WISE objects, there are some key features missing. For example, RTPC and state switch usage isn't available at the moment, but there is a workaround using traditional query objects as your starting point. But that'll come in probably the next release. Also offer better list management for offer new operators to the syntax to manage lists. More usage within WAAPI. Currently, we only have the query function that uses it. And, whoops, very nice, would be syntax highlighting. Instead of using an orange or red flashing strobe and a tooltip, we'll have better feedback to help you use these more efficiently and more quickly. And finally, so a whole bunch of online resources. Obviously, we have the resources, online references for WAAPI, the WAQL syntax, all the WISE objects and the properties. That's why I knew I had to filter by action type value 1 for some odd reason. We have developer and community blogs. We have our Twitch channel, for those who are not aware, Wise Up on Air, hosted by Damien Kaspauer. So here's a link to the stream that introduced WAAPI. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much. So we have some time if anyone has questions specific to WAQL or WAAPI. I have a few minutes. I think a microphone's coming your way. Right there.
Great. Hey, thanks. Really interesting talk. I just wanted to ask a question about the Wise authoring query language. Is it possible in Wise to save and recall complex searches in the same way that you can do with traditional queries?
Not at the moment. That would be a nice feature to add in future releases. But no, sadly not at the moment.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, it's quite a specific one, but it's often quite interesting trying to search for music subtracks. I didn't know if that was something that WAQL would cover in terms of their search, or is it going to be a bit different because they don't have their own unique identifier? So if I've got a subtrack with about 15 music subtracks on it, can I search by the state of each of those?
I don't have the online reference available, so I can't.
Okay,
I don't have the
fine,
syntax
yeah.
available.
I thought it might be a bit too
I
technical.
suspect you can, but yeah, I'd probably be a bit more involved.
Okay, and play with it.
You got me.
Hey, in that first example, you did something with you in the MIDI one. You did it all in Python, and you said, "Oh, I'm a C++ programmer, and I had to Google it all." Did you do it in Python just for demonstration purposes, or was there a particular reason that you would want to write that functionality in Python?
No, just to try something else.
Okay, cool, fair enough.
Yeah.
I suppose I just wanted to reassure folks in the room who might be new to interactive audio and who maybe even haven't used Wise yet, and they're hearing all this stuff and they're maybe freaking out a little bit, that just to reassure them that this is like an advanced topic for advanced Wise users, technical sound designers, music implementers, programmers who are making the pipeline easier to use for everyone working on it. So don't freak out.
Hence a list of all the references and tutorials.
Yeah, exactly. It's super advanced. So on the one hand, I think it's great when you are like, I don't know what's going on, because it lets you know that there's this whole other world of stuff that you can learn about if you find it interesting. But anyway, to turn it into a question, it's pretty clear that the solution, these kinds of solutions are about trying to address pain points in using in Wise, where it's those repetitive tasks and things that are just, make you angry.
Yeah.
And so it's great to see that. But also, obviously, Wise is already this amazing tool that gives you a lot of rope to get yourself into trouble. And so it's great to have tools to sort of address a lot of that stuff. But nonetheless, it's like it also adds more complexity. And it's just the nature of the beast. But I just wonder internally at AK, not to put you on the spot, but like there must be conversations about, are we just going to keep making this thing more complex versus which things can we make actually simpler?
Yeah, there's for the past, I'd say 3 years, and if some people have been to GDC, I forget which year it was, we had 2 team members specifically from the UX team interviewing many sound designers, power users of Wise, I guess, to first identify the pain points. What makes this UI less intuitive? I mean, once you've been using it for years, you know where to find everything. but myself when I joined AK is what the F is going on. So yeah, there is a big effort to revamp the UX for WISE. I'm not sure how much I'm allowed to share at the moment, but gradually we're addressing those pain points, including those who use WISE on Mac. Very sorry. So there's also a great big effort. Obviously, this requires a lot of time and implementation to have a true cross-platform application. So that's ongoing. So we're thinking of you. We love you. We want you all to be happy and not throw your Mac.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, really excited to see the Reaper extension you guys have done.
Right.
And yeah, kudos for sort of putting that on GitHub when it comes around. But yeah, we're certainly interested in that. Do you have any plans for WAAPI, or maybe it's an existing thing, to look at profile captures and kind of that side of WISE, to kind of interact with that in WAAPI, like to trigger captures, but then to like get the data from what you've captured? Because I think that would be something we'd be interested in.
That's currently in the plans. I'm no longer part of the UX team who handle WAAPI. I only introduced the base version. Honestly, I don't know if that's in the pipeline. Afterwards, if you want to give me your email, maybe I can get that info and get it back to you.
Cool. Thank you very much.
All right. Wow, I didn't expect this many questions about WAAPI.
Just a small one, really. You might already have mentioned it, might just pass me by, but with the WAQL, is there a simple way to just do the opposite of what you did in terms, like, can you exclude things easily rather than just find them? So like, I want to see everything except all the stuff in the ambience actor mixer, for example.
Not that I recall.
Okay. That I'm pretty sure I've had occasions where I'd like to do stuff like that.
Right.
But I guess like basically just put a minus sign on everything and be like the opposite,
Right.
or something like that. But
It's good
okay.
feedback. I'll bring
Yeah,
it.
okay, cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So if there's nothing else, I'll be around all day. If anyone wants to go grab a beer or something, we can talk anything WISE. Hopefully I can give you an answer. If not, I'll go back to Montreal, find a smarter person, and get you the answer and get it back to you. So if that's it, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. That was really interesting. Thank you very much. So just a reminder that we are moving rooms. We're moving rooms. So when we come back we'll be starting at 1:15. So we've got quite a big break now. We'll be in room 1. This one, big one under the stairs on the left. Cheers. See you then. Try not to be late.